For over 1,000 years, Rome was basically the center of the known world. I mean, this was an empire that stretched from Britain all the way to the Middle East, a superpower that felt like it would last forever. And then, it just didn't. The story of how it all fell apart has captivated us for centuries. So, let's get into it.
So, what really brought down this absolute giant? People usually point to the usual suspects, barbarian invasions, or maybe widespread corruption. But honestly, those are just single pieces of a much, much bigger puzzle. The real story is way more interesting and surprisingly relevant to us today.
Because here's the thing, Rome didn't fall in a single day. It wasn't like a movie with one final battle or one fatal mistake. Instead, it was this slow, messy, complicated unraveling that happened over generations. And understanding that process, well, that's the key to figuring out how even the mightiest societies can break down.
Okay, so first up, we've got to reframe what we even mean by the fall. It was less of a sudden, catastrophic collapse and way more of a long, messy transformation. And it looked totally different depending on where you were standing in the empire.
Just look at the sheer scale of time we're talking about here. It's wild. The empire hits its absolute peak in 117 CE. But the date we all learn in school for the fall of the West, that's 476. That's more than 350 years later. And get this, even then, the eastern half of the empire kept on trucking for another 1,000 years. That alone tells you this wasn't one single event. It was a long, slow process.
So the crucial point is that the fall was really a transition. It wasn't some kind of apocalypse where everything just ended. I mean, life went on. People were still speaking Latin, Roman laws shaped the new kingdoms that popped up, and over in the East, the empire was actually thriving. It was more like the slow birth of a new world out of the old.
So if it wasn't just one thing, what was it? Well, think of it like a perfect storm. Rome was weakened by a whole cascade of crises, a bunch of interconnected problems that all fed into each other and just snowballed.
We can basically break it down into 6 major areas. You had serious economic problems, constant political chaos, massive pressure on the borders, an empire that was just too darn big to manage, devastating pandemics, and even environmental stress. Any one of these on its own might have been survivable, but all of them together, it was just overwhelming.
Let's start with the money. For centuries, Rome's whole economy was fueled by conquest. New land, new gold, new people. Well, when the expansion stopped, the new money dried up. To pay the bills, emperors started, cheating. They'd make coins with less silver in them, which led to runaway inflation. And of course, this completely wrecked the economy. Tax revenues just plummeted, and suddenly the state couldn't afford to pay its soldiers or fix its roads. It was a vicious downward spiral.
And then there was the political chaos. I mean, this is just mind-blowing. In one 50-year stretch in the 3rd century, Rome had more than 50 emperors. 50! And most of them were assassinated. How are you supposed to run a massive empire when the leadership is just this violent revolving door? The simple answer is, you can't.
All that instability at the top had a huge trickle-down effect on the military. To defend its huge borders, Rome started hiring more and more non-Roman soldiers. And for a while that worked out. But over time, the army became less loyal to the idea of Rome itself and more loyal to their own generals or their own tribes. So when the state couldn't pay them anymore, the borders pretty much became impossible to defend.
And you can really see how these core problems created this awful feedback loop. The shaky economy and the political chaos made the government weaker, which made it way harder to deal with military threats. And then you pour things like deadly plagues on top of that, which killed millions and shrunk the tax base even more, and an empire that was just too big to govern with ancient tech. You can see how things got bad fast.
But all of this leads to a really critical question. If the whole empire was facing these problems, why did the western part fall apart while the east managed to survive for another 1,000 years? The answer really boils down to 2 things: geography and money. The Western Empire was huge, its provinces were generally poorer, and it had these incredibly long, difficult borders to defend. The East, on the other hand, was more compact, it had the wealthiest cities and trade routes, and it was just plain easier to govern and protect. So when all those crises hit, the West was simply more fragile. It just didn't have the resources to bounce back. And that brings us right to the heart of the matter. This quote just nails it. Rome didn't collapse because people suddenly got lazy or morally corrupt. It fell because its core systems, the economy, the government, the military, they all became too brittle, too strained to handle the constant pressure. Eventually, the shocks just kept coming until the whole thing shattered.
So why should we care about all this? It happened like 1,500 years ago, right? Well, it's because the story of Rome is a timeless lesson in how complex societies can fail, and some of its patterns are kind of eerily familiar.
Seriously, just think about it for a second. Severe economic strain, deep political divisions, a growing loss of trust in our institutions, intense arguments over who we are, our shared identity, plus massive global pressures like climate change and migration. These aren't just ancient problems. They are literally the headlines in our world today.
And that's exactly why we still study Rome. It's like this giant warning label from history. It shows us just how fragile those interconnected systems that we rely on can become. It's a case study in what happens when a society's problems start growing faster than its ability to solve them.
All right, so after all of that, what's the one big idea we should walk away with from the collapse of one of the greatest empires in human history?
It's this, right here. Civilizations don't usually die from a single dramatic knockout punch. They tend to decay from the inside out. They fail when their foundations, their economy, their politics, their social fabric, can no longer support the weight of the challenges they're facing. Rome's story isn't just about the past. It's a timeless lesson about the critical need for resilience, for adaptation, and for finding a way to hold things together.